We're going live now, actually. Hi, this is Vincent, your co-host for Web3 Memo. I'm here with Paul, CEO and founder of Telcoin, and my co-host Jad. Welcome to this very first episode of Web3 Memo, and thanks for coming, Jad. Thanks for coming, Paul.
Thanks, Vince. Thanks, Judd. I appreciate it. Good to see you both, and happy to be here.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Vince. Happy to have you here.
Paul, you're in LA, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't know it. It's not normal weather here, but yes.
Yeah. Well, it happens. So thank you actually for joining this podcast on the first episode. We're really touched that you accepted our invitation. You're the CEO and founder of Telcoin. I've been following Telcoin ever since its inception. I took part in its first token launch also and have used it, the latest version 3 and everything. Maybe you tell us a little bit about Telcoin before we go into our agenda so that we have some context.
Sure. Well, Telcoin is, as I think probably anyone watching here knows, is about financial inclusion more than anything, and also about aligning with telecom industry. I mean, I think to deliver self-custodial financial services and access to capital to the masses or anyone holding a phone. Just to give you a little bit of background, I think my personal, I'd say what brought me here ever since, studying economics a whole long time ago was, I was always interested in macroeconomics and macro forces. And, when I first started traveling and meeting people around the world, and what to me, the lens that I always looked at it from was one of, what are the macro forces that, around this person in front of me in Uganda or in Indonesia or in Lebanon, that kind of determines what they can become in their life. And that's kind of the underlying motivation. I think from a business standpoint, what brought me to found the company was that I was on a day-to-day basis talking to telecom CFOs, and I immediately saw some synergy there. And when I first kind of was exposed to distributed ledger technology, blockchain, cryptocurrency, whatever you want to call it, I was determined to figure out how can this technology really help give equal access to people around the world in terms of financial opportunity, access to capital, and how can telecoms kind of be a facilitator of that. So that's the background of the company. I think we've evolved into a whole bunch of different aspects, but we can talk about that. But thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I didn't really even realize this was going to be a live broadcast until this morning. Otherwise, I think there's no way you would have roped me into this. So this is really off the cuff.
That's great. That's how it's intended to be. Let's take it just like as a casual casual discussion. Before I dig deeper into like trying to understand how you're aligning telcos and blockchain, thanks for sharing your personal journey into this. I will try to go, I think, into a couple of themes here. First, I want to ask you about all this alignment of your mission. You mentioned financial inclusion, you mentioned telcos, you mentioned blockchain, remittance also, banking, I don't know. So I want to try to figure out what your vision is in terms of like putting all these things together for the next, as a next generation solution. But also, if you don't mind, after that, if we still have some time, I'd like to go into your views on how you're using tokenomics and the tokens and, in turn for supporting this mission. Is that okay, Jad? Do you have any other things you would like to interject?
No, definitely sounds good. We'll add some questions while we dive deeper in the discussion. So please go ahead.
So Paul, I just took a first note here as you were talking about your own journey into this business. You said you were exposed to a lot of telco CEOs and you found synergy when you heard about blockchain technology. Maybe for you, it's very clear what the synergy between telco and blockchain or distributed ledger is. But for laymen like me, I don't know, maybe you can like bring it down to elaborate what is that synergy you're mentioning.
Sure. Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, from a business standpoint, I was more working with CFOs, not necessarily the CEO, and they're in the capacity of fraud, reducing fraud losses. But the elephant in the room was always that people weren't using traditional telecom services anymore. They were just using telecoms to connect to the internet and using over-the-top Facebook, WhatsApp, what have you, to communicate. And so, the priority was where, new revenue streams. What could those be? And the number one prospect was always, I think, mobile financial services, and that really started with the Safaricom story almost 15 years ago now, and that was using your telecom credit to your prepaid telecom credit to transfer to a grocer on the corner in exchange for groceries, and that quickly overnight became effectively the largest bank in Kenya with more than 80% adoption, I think, after the first year, in a place where less than 10% of people had traditional bank accounts at the time. So the problem that telcos ran into was that central bank there and everywhere else quickly realized that if you allow a telecom to present their prepaid credit as something still an asset of the consumer that they can spend, it's effectively a bank, and so you can't expose customer funds to another business's risks, like if there were an earthquake that knocked out a telecom. So they were all forced to spin off as banks, and so I think the idea of DLT, or distributed ledger technology, blockchain cryptocurrency, is that it really does decouple the kind of the layers of banking, or allow for a decoupling. And what that means for a mobile network is, as someone who has this great technical ability, frankly, much greater than a Western Union or a bank that has you fill out a paper form to say who you are. I mean, the telecom has technical abilities to know, to control fraud and secure a real-time transaction. So the idea is, how can they do that without taking custody of funds? Well, that's what blockchain, I think, presents as an opportunity. So that's what when we talk to telecoms, we talk about that as an MFS 2.0, mobile financial services 2.0. So a second way, hey, how as a mobile network, how can you leverage this technology to offer financial services to your customers without taking custody of the funds and needing all of the sort of regulatory oversight that comes along with being a bank? That's the business side. I mean, I think really, to me, I saw that as a means to deliver a mission of financial inclusion that I think is promised by blockchain, but very hard in practice to deliver to the end user. And that's where I saw that business synergy is a way to do that.
So I see that basically you found a very obvious pain within the telcos, which was, well, trying to increase revenue by allowing transfers, but without having to be an actual traditional bank. And you figured that to solve that pain, the blockchain technology would solve that pain, I guess, right? So on the telco side, on the business enterprise side, it's kind of clear to me by now. But how do you connect this with like the consumer when you say financial inclusion?
Well, I mean, you just look at last week, and with everything that kind of collapsed last week, you had regulators force Coinbase to admit that, listen, if we went public, or I'm sorry, if we went bankrupt, your funds might be at risk, and that customer funds of Coinbase are on their balance sheet, and so they're effectively treating that the way a bank would without the regulation of a bank. So the point is, that's the reason why from the very beginning we've used a 3-key system where we can prove that if we're hacked, if it's from a hack or a financial meltdown or business bankruptcy, we can't possibly lose customer funds. And so that's the reason why we designed it that way from the beginning was, we we saw DeFi and self-custody as important because we were trying to solve the telecom problem of, hey, mobile money was a great idea, but we didn't really want to be a bank, and so that's the reason why we went down that path. It's turned out to be very kind of fortuitous because, as you can see, I think there is now a demand for DeFi and self-custody that we put ourselves in a position to satisfy. So so that's where, if that makes sense, that's kind of from the consumer's perspective, it's about self-custody. And so
I'm not able to connect both sides. I understood like the self-custody for the consumer side, right? So they're no longer reliant on a custodian who may, as
they're relying on a transparent security model as custodian. They hold one key that is generated on their device that we never see. The benefit, though, is that unlike a single key system, that be it blockchain.com or using Metamask on your own or what have you, if you have the ability to lose and never recover. Whereas in the 3-key system, there is this trusted third party and Telcoin that can re-authenticate you and regenerate that key.
Okay, so that was one thing I wanted to understand better. So when you say it would involve financial inclusion to consumers, I could, in theory, tell you that, I can transfer funds to from wherever I live to my grandma using my MetaMask and onto her MetaMask. But it seems there's this 3-key system. Sometimes you mentioned like very technical terms for us that maybe, we need to take a pause and understand them. So what's the difference there between like what I understand to be a 1-key system from solutions like MetaMask versus a 3-key system of Telcoin?
Well, I think that,
is that the difference? So is that mainly the difference between using Telcoin versus using just?
Well, it's one of the most important building blocks, I think. So to take a step back, DLT and what that means for financial inclusion is about trust and trustless nature of, if you want to build a trustless system that's efficient and scalable and works, I think one way to do it is to find a trusted group. In our case, it's the, say, 750 telecoms, and say, hey, you have a right to run a node, or you have kind of preferential rights in our system in terms of introducing these services. But to take a step back and just think about trust, that's it. Like if you really self-custody, to us, the promise of DLT for financial inclusion is about building a system that relies on a transparent security model that is trustless, and that you're not forcing yourself to believe in one individual or institution and to custody your assets, because how else can you really tear down borders of in terms of the global financial system, and that's really what at the lower level it is. Now, practically, how do you actually connect a user to that? Well, there's 2 aspects of there. One is it's got to be easy to use, right? A single key system using MetaMask, someone could use that to send money to their grandma. It's not very easy to understand, and there are risks too. You could use it improperly and lose it. So the trick and what we tried to design with Telcoin is a system that is self-custodial, but in a safe and secure, easy to use manner.
But doesn't that mean that I should trust Telcoin?
No, we present a transparent security model, and I recognize that we're still mid-flight in that journey, but we are developing that as part of our whole decentralization process. We just we've been very deliberate in that respect, and that we really didn't want to put stuff out there until it was absolutely necessary. We're not trying to tout something up front. But that is you already technically have that ability, and we're preparing to publish that so that people know, hey, technically we could pull our assets out of this system, and that while you're trusting the security model that we've built, it's transparent and you understand how it works. And we, as one of a participant that has published the software and the security model for you, and provided a way for you to adopt it, you're trusting us in that capacity, but not, we've built a system that doesn't rely on us, as opposed to a bank that is, or some other money transmitter or telecom that is custody of your funds and actually has to admit, like Coinbase just says, that if they went under, your assets are not necessarily safe.
Right. So within the context of having to trust Telcoin, what you're saying, Telcoin would eventually be only one of many validators, and happens to be that validator who published the software and the other products. Is that it?
Well, no, I think, we're mixing a few different things. We are one app. There's also the side chain that right now we're on Polygon, but we have a Rivendell project which is well underway, and we will, the vision there, and that's part of this decoupling. In other words, down at the settlement layer, the blockchain layer, you would have to be the validators of that side chain you would have to be a GSMA full member. In other words, one of a national mobile network operator. And that's relatively arbitrary, but how arbitrary are the validators on Polygon? I'm not trying to say one way is wrong or right. I just think that in our case, we've said, okay, here's this limited set, and they all have big data centers. And I think more importantly, they're the most distributed industry in the world. There's 2 or 3 giants in every country. So in terms of real kind of global sort of equality, I think in influence and control over a system, that's something that I like.
Okay, that's a good segue. Actually, mentioning GSMA. GSMA is the GSM Association, where mostly telcos belong to, right? The business
Correct.
Chamber of Telcos. Okay, so I think it's a good segue for me to understand here. On one hand, the value prop that you offer to the telcos, and on the other, the value props you just mentioned that you offer in terms of security and ease of use to the consumer. How are they connected together? Why? You mentioned it's kind of arbitrary that you choose, GSMA members to be validators on your Rivendell project. Is it truly just so arbitrary, or is there like any other reason that you're connecting these two sides via?
Well, yeah. When I say it's arbitrary, I mean that the fundamentals that will make the system scalable are obviously not arbitrary, and that we believe that they have the connection to their customer. They already know their customer to an extent. They're distributed in nature. They're sort of all forced to at least answer to some government regulator, so that that this other player isn't going to act nefariously. There's some sort of control, but at the same time, it's fully distributed. So when I say it's arbitrary, I mean that you could set up a system where you had just the first 700 people or 1,000 people in the door could be validators. We're in that, and still see the benefit of that, like you can see on Polygon right now. What's not arbitrary is the long-term view, and where I see that that synergy is actually, they have something to offer, right? That is not from my perspective. The heart of the company is about the mission and what that means for the end consumer in a lot of less privileged places, corners of the world. But the telecom industry is one that is distributed enough to, I think, address the interests of people globally in an equitable manner, and in a way that is trustable, and that, do you really want your assets to be in the hands of a system validated by 700 random people that you never met? Not saying that can't work, but I think at least knowing that the telecom doesn't actually control your money on their balance sheet, but they're a participant in a system, in a trustless system that you can trust, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow, this is so much to process, man. I'm sorry. I'm sure that I got like maybe half of it wrong in my mind, but what I got, I think, is quite interesting. Is there like, how does that really translate? Can you talk into like day-to-day things, and can you maybe
Well, I
talk
think,
about user journey, or
yeah, I
you
think
know,
the
overall? But
yeah, I think
yeah,
the challenge for everybody in the industry is how do we move these great ideas in, from an enthusiastic community to the average person. And, the challenge for us has been, where do the obvious use case that made sense at the beginning was remittance. And I think it's not that doesn't still make sense, but one of the challenges we've had is, the average person that's interested in our project right now is not the average person that just wants to send $100 to their grandma in the Philippines. And so what we've realized is we'll disrupt remittance, but not in a way that, by just being cheaper or faster or what have you. We'll disrupt it because we redefine what it means. For us, remittance, the way that we'll redefine it is giving equal access to any digital asset, any stablecoin, any currency, any crypto, on both sides of a major corridor. Once any American and any Filipino and any Mexican can connect their bank one click into any stablecoin, any digital asset, suddenly there isn't this concept of a remittance having to be this transaction that forces you into this kind of horrible FX as part of the remittance itself. The remittance just becomes any movement of a digital asset across a border. So I can hold a stable coin from the Philippine peso just as easily as the Filipino could hold a USD stable coin. And then you get to the actual exchange itself being, and this is where the kind of telex or liquidity layer comes into play. And it's people making markets for other people, right? Instead of putting your money in a bank account and making 0.1%, why not put it into a liquidity pool that between a Mexican peso and a USD stablecoin that really provides a mid-market rate to your brother down the street who's sending money home, right? And you're making that market for him in a much better rate to the bank, and you're actually making a profit off of it that's better than the bank would offer you. So that's where the way we're approaching it. I think that what the challenge that has presented to us is a little bit of an identity crisis. Or we want to send money smarter, but actually what we have to do is we have to attract people to trade, give access to DeFi crypto trading on both sides of a corridor before we can really realize that mission. So that's something that we're dealing with right now, and you'll see a little bit of tweaking in the very near future and how we're presenting ourselves around related to that.
Yeah, looking forward. I live in Dubai, and I noticed recently that on the Telcoin app, you have like a lot of destinations that could connect to Dubai, but you don't have the UAE in there yet.
Right. I mean, what
I see, like,
Pakistan, the
Bangladesh.
UAE has been, I've spoken at a number of Etisalat. Etisalat is like the Verizon or AT&T of the UAE. I've spoken at a number of their internal conferences, both in the fraud management and MFS side, and they've been a great supporter from early on. But one of the things we realize is that places like the Middle East make more sense to really hit after you've got all of the destinations. In other words, our starting point from a sending side is really US, Canada, Australia, Singapore, these places. And then really after getting things fully up and running into the destinations from the middle, then I think it makes sense to add on Middle East as sending markets. It's not that we definitely have great supporters there. It's just the natural kind of progression. That's more of a next year thing for us. Although we actually just completed a internal market study for UAE, so we're preparing an application there.
Nice. Yeah,
there are ways we can integrate it now with like Etisalat e-wallet or with other similar. It's just we want to. There's a lot of different things we could do, and we got to very carefully choose our where to put our resources, and want to make sure it's something that's going to be very easy to use and is going to be adopted heavily. So, yeah.
That's a lot of aspects. So there's these telcos that you seem to know very much in depth. On one hand, there's the consumer on the other, and all this comes from your own experience. So you know these guys here. You mentioned Etisalat guys from even before starting Telcoin.
Oh yeah, and I with QTEL, Arita Group, Etisalat, those two. Vian Group in the Middle East as well, and a bunch, have worked with a bunch of groups from a very long time. The issue, I think, is not. I think it's navigating, identifying at what point in the journey it makes sense to really involve them, because you don't want to tell an MTN or an Airtel or Vodafone that, hey, your mobile money is that's not the wave of the future. That you should really do all DeFi. So it's a delicate balance to not cannibalize or present something that is maybe cannibalizing what works now for them.
Actually, it's an interesting point. So when you started back then, let's say if we step back to the beginning in 2017, where you had to build your ecosystem of partners and onboard telcos, what was kind of your story, your pitch, and how were they reacting to this?
Yeah, at the very beginning, and I mean kind of the fall of 2017, it was really about, and the very beginning of 2018, it was about being a doorway from mobile money to crypto or to DeFi, or not. It wasn't called DeFi at the time, but effectively the same thing. I think that what happened was, we quickly realized that from a regulatory standpoint, that was going to be hard for them to do, especially when things dropped there in the spring of 2018. So that was why we, at the advice of a number of them, just focused on, hey, let's start out just by sending money. So a remittance use case that can easily connect to all of these platforms. And so that's why we went through this phase where we sort of had two offerings in one, a fiat remittance and a crypto wallet, right? And those are now merging. But yeah, that allowed us to connect and be able to send to all of those mobile money platforms. But I think that the next phase is more about, okay, now how do we do that? Present something that's complementary, that you can kind of hedge your bet on. And by and large, there are very few that have been wildly successful. A lot of the startups are, Uber type startup wallets have really kind of stepped in places, especially in Southeast Asia, and bypassed user accounts of mobile money very, very quickly. So even the ones that have been successful, I think the telecoms are still looking for other ways to get into non-custodial financial services.
So I also saw a few questions here on the comments that were quite interesting. Maybe I will just cherry pick a couple now that are related to the theme we're touching on, and leave the rest for later. Somebody mentioned, I'm sorry, I forgot the names of whoever commented it, but somebody had an interesting question here. The Telcoin wallet would still belong to Telcoin. Is that correct?
No, when we say the Telcoin wallet, there's the Telcoin app and there's the Telcoin wallet. So the Telcoin wallet does not belong to Telcoin. Your Telcoin wallet is on the blockchain, and the Telcoin app is a way to utilize your key to initiate a transaction on the blockchain. that your key that we never touch, and also a way to utilize Telcoin's key to sign that transaction and affect it, and then display what's on the blockchain. So the Telcoin Wallet is actually something that we have one key. We hold one key for, are bound by the terms and conditions that the consumer signs, but no, that's not something that we control. The Telcoin app is IP of the company that we're publishing for the user to use their wallet.
But what touches on the three keys system? So I understand. So since the assets are on the blockchain, if the wallet goes down, it's okay. They're still accessible. But what about that three key system? Is it connected to the app, or is it? So if the app creators, what do I lose?
The app actually, well, more precisely put, the app is able to leverage both allows the user to leverage the key that they've generated on their phone, and it also leverages the key that is controlled by Telcoin securely stored in our backend. Whereas, and this is where I get into what we're preparing to publish very soon, are instructions for the user that, hey, technically though, that wallet out there, if we're completely hacked, first of all, here's a publicly audited, publicly available disclosure about the security model and the fact that if we're hacked, or we don't technically have the ability to unilaterally move the funds. But then also, if you wanted to, hypothetically, if our system was totally down, you could still move the funds on your own by interfacing with a trusted third party. If that's getting a little too much into the weeds, but I think we'll try to make that as clear as possible, so that, in other words, it's self-custody in that we can't actually lose the funds technically, and we don't have them on our balance sheet. We don't control them, but you have a way to interface with that transparent security model, with or without us.
Nice, interesting. And so there's another leitmotif I kept seeing pop up again in the comments as we were talking, and it's the mention of Ripple. I don't know if you want to talk about other services, but there's I think maybe touching upon fundamentally the difference between Telcoin and Ripple would be very helpful in terms of enlightening us on the Telcoin, understanding Telcoin better, by comparison at least.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't followed Ripple recently, so I can't comment a whole lot on that. But I think that
in itself is a great comment.
Well, I think also, if you want to talk about the idea of a token, and I think we've taken a very different approach to how we're dealing with regulators, and we did an ICO really early on before anybody really realized what sort of rules should be in place for that. I think one of the things that I kind of wanted to do right when I took over a year and a half ago was, first of all, do an equity raise, and then second, start a decentralization process that actually made sense in the context of the utility of our token. I only say that because I'm not sure that I think maybe their approach has been a little bit different. My understanding is that they're trying to use blockchain to enable banks to settle international transfers easier between two institutions. So that's, we're much more focused on self-custody down to the consumer, and the person that's going to be making the market that you're leveraging will also be individual consumers in DeFi liquidity pool. So I guess that's the most important way that we would differentiate ourselves.
Okay. And so who are your consumers? How do you get to them?
Yeah, so that kind of gets back to our kind of identity crisis, in that we have sort of, if you build it, they will come problem, a cart before the horse problem, and you want to solve this remittance problem, but the only way we disrupt a remittance corridor is by, fully standing up our full stack on two sides of a corridor. In other words, very easy to access to crypto stablecoin rails on two sides of a large corridor. And how do you do that? You do that by attracting people who are interested in digital assets and DeFi trading. And so, that's something that we've figured out and are about to, I wouldn't say pivot to, but kind of tweak in terms of our presentation, because we now have a system, at least in the US, and that we can easily also turn on in Canada. Well, certain aspects are already turned on in Canada, but we'll do the full stack first in the US, Canada, Australia, Singapore. And what that is very easy access even to a banking rail into stablecoins and connecting in a regulated manner consumers to DeFi platforms. And so that's, we sort of, we've been able to kind of put that together behind the curtain, with the front facing image being our mission of making rethinking, reimagining remittance. I think now we're to the point where we're ready to scale that. And the only way to scale that is, like you said, really think clearly about how to attract users. And that's more about, access to DeFi and digital assets. And so we're starting that this month in the US, and then we'll add additional markets. I think on where it'll get really exciting is a little bit later in the year, when we can do that as well on some of the receiving sides. And that's where, once those are in place, we kind of revisit direct marketing of remittance as something on those corridors where we've kind of deployed the full stack on both sides.
Yeah. What could be the low-hanging fruit for the marketing and to target these consumers?
Well, in the US, it's easy. There's a massive sea of, there's definitely demand for DeFi trading. I mean, we haven't done any marketing at all yet. You can see we're already able to generate some revenue there. So definitely the low-hanging fruit, obviously, from a business standpoint, is just adding assets. First of all, we're figuring out how to remove barriers and in terms of making the user experience to onboard into stablecoins in the US very seamless from your bank account. That's step one, that adding more assets so that it is a viable alternative to a centralized exchange. I think the market for that is big enough to really support taking some market share. And then even if it's just from the segment of people interested that understand DeFi and have enough of an interest in that to want to trade on DeFi as opposed to a centralized exchange. The beauty, of course, is then when that is something that's a lot easier. That model is a lot easier to port into another country, just because you're not having to worry about custodying funds and heavier regulation in order to deploy that model into another country.
I'm getting some questions here, a lot of questions about some things that Jad touched upon.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm actually happy that I didn't even realize there was, until now, there's comments. So it'd be great to turn it into a little bit more of an AMA here at the end.
Yeah, I'm trying to extract, actually, as you go, I'm trying to extract some of the questions from the comments. I'm like, this stuff is so much like above my head that I need help from the community here. But a couple of things that got repeated were updates on Rivendell, which I understand is the nodes for validation that you guys are deploying. Maybe you can also touch upon, explain it a little bit. That's one thing. And then another question that got repeated was updates on the bank. I mean, we've talked about telcos and consumers and apps and blockchains. We haven't touched any bank subject, but many people are asking about the bank. But let's start with Rivendell maybe before the bank.
Right. Yeah. So Rivendell, there will be a little bit of a reboot in the kind of front image of that, but under the hood, it's been progressing for a year now very well. We have an initial testnet up, and we have a kind of lineup of interested parties. I mean, we focus first on, okay, how do we connect to all these mobile wallets, and then second on this is the phase now that we're dealing with is, okay, now running a node, which is frankly a lot easier because it's not like you have to worry about, from a telecom's perspective, the challenges that we faced before in the first wave, which is, what are the compliance complications of connecting our mobile money to a crypto platform? Now this is more, hey, unless mining is explicitly illegal in your country, it's very easy for a telco to sign on to operate a node. So that's, in testnet phase, we expect to bring that into like alpha phase, if you will, in the third quarter. But again, it's a pretty long process where we'll have, we wouldn't move, for example, we wouldn't consider moving our wallets over to it until it's running in alpha, beta, a good like 3 quarters of it running in parallel. But that's progressing well. So we hope to be able to have some good public announcements in the third quarter on that. The bank side, I mean, that's obviously kind of the part that I've been the most heavily involved in recently and really excited about. That's going very well. I mean, I really, I've gotten the opportunity to meet a lot of the different players in this that people may be heard of in projects. Wyoming, I'd say, did a lot of service, and Caitlin Long, I have great respect for her and the role that has been played there. I really feel that from our perspective and Nebraska's perspective, they kind of took the arrows on that and being the first out there. From the beginning, we've tried to take it. We've agreed that we're going to do this in a very, very low profile manner. So we're going to let the fat lady sing and not really talk about it until then. At the same time, I mean, we're very, very far along on that, and I mean, just look at what's happening with USDT, with everything. It's hard for them. When I say them, for regulators to kind of block what we're trying to do, because I think we're trying to do it exactly the way that they're wanting us to do it, right? That's in line with the executive order, the Fed papers on this, and so we're moving about as fast as we possibly could. I think the earliest that we could apply for. This is publicly out there. If you were to go to the Nebraska Department of Banking, the earliest we could apply for a division really isn't going to be until like September or October. But we figured out a way to move forward ahead of that. So there's a couple tracks because there's OCC guidance already right now that out there in those interpretive letters that authorizes banks already to do the things that we want to do. So I don't know the question, but
Jad was very curious about what was going on this week.
About yes, we'll cover this in a few minutes. So now moving to the tokenomics part, a lot of new entrepreneurs in the Web3 space, eventually if they want to launch their own coin, their own token, they face a lot of issues around what's the tokenomics and how, for example, they should price their coin at first the listing. So can you elaborate more on the steps you went through? Let's say upon your first ICO, how did you think about pricing? How did you think about supply and the different levels?
I mean, we again at that point in time, things were still very nascent. So how we went about thinking of it is probably different from how I would recommend going about it right now. But at that point, it was really, looking at the other ICOs that had happened already. And, we really wanted to be clear to say from the beginning, there's half the supply is going here. Only a small percentage is going to the team, which was smaller than others that had been coming out at the time. In retrospect, I would have done things way differently. But nobody really knew. I think the important thing now, if you're considering a project, is to really carefully think about the role of traditional equity raise and a token, and make sure that decide, what is the ecosystem or utility that the token's going to is going to serve, and how to align tokenomics or whatever you want to call it, and the raise to facilitate that. And then separately, think about the business as a separate beast, and how do you do some equity raise, traditional equity raise, in parallel or before, and really keep those firewalled and get good counsel up front on how to keep those firewalled and act in good faith. I think that you don't have to be scared to what this is operating in a gray zone, and as long as the most important thing, I think, is to operate in good faith and really kind of seek counsel on all of your ideas.
And let's say, how did you set the first price? Let's say.
Yeah, so that was really, again, I think we looked at the market, we looked at other ones out there. We kind of thought about what we could. It was actually at the time we priced we were looking at, hey, to do what we want to do, we think we require like around $10 million worth of ETH. And that was the model that's where we started. And frankly, we gauged the appetite for that, and it seemed like it was there. Then we thought, what is a reasonable, what's a reasonable chunk of the pie to allocate to that? And it was like 20% at the time. That evolved into, by the time we actually turned it on, I feel like it was closer to about $25 million worth of ETH. Then that quickly went up and then way down. I think in the end, it was around $8 million, right? After all was said and done, in terms of the USD value. We were committed to not cash it out right away. We were committed to not make it kind of try to play the market or anything. Of course, it would have been great if we cashed it out at 60 million and parked it in the bank. But no, So I don't know if that answers your question. We really, there wasn't any, in retrospect, I guess what you're kind of getting at is that it would have, it probably makes more sense to do. I mean, I was able at the time personally to kind of bankroll the initial overhead, and maybe that, that probably gave us a luxury that was a little bit of a curse, right? And that we weren't forced to kind of figure out the business fundamentals very early on. We went straight into the token. I think that if you were doing it now, you'd really want to, in parallel, think about both sides and carefully construct that in a way that doesn't require you to lean on the token side in order to operate your business.
Okay, and how do you see the latest event related to the Luna UST impact, and how would it impact the whole industry? Maybe maybe it could push some traditional stakeholders to have more questions about the space itself. And maybe have you already felt some of its impact?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that those sort of algorithmic ones, I mean, I guess there's two sides to it. One is more philosophical, and I think people wanted to stand up something that was not technically tied to a fiat currency and a traditional banking system, which, I can relate to that philosophical slant, but it's hard to have that and also try to connect the system to the everyday user. The other side is really just the kind of economics of it all. And I think that now that you have these platforms, if Aave or Compound or whatever have it, that you can put on top of a stable coin, why I don't really understand the point of having the risk underneath the stable coin. Why not have it on top? So I think if you're going to call something the name US, that alludes to a USD, why peg it and have it? I mean, why not have that layer be very, very, very certain and 100% backed by what it's represented itself as? Put the risk layer on top of that and have it be very transparent to the consumer. That's my. But I mean, I can understand the origins of it, and I think we got to step back and say, hey, can we have some of the exciting aspects of these sorts of algorithmic platforms, but turn it around so that it's a little bit more safe and transparent for consumers in terms of the risk that's being undertaken.
When you say the risk to be on the layer on top, you mean the algorithmic?
Well, I mean, if you want to post your, if you're wanting to post crypto as collateral for something else, that should be something very, like, why have that underneath something that's represented as a digital dollar, right? I don't see the need for that. Make it very clear that, hey, this is what you're posting up and as collateral, and this is what you're receiving. That can be done without the stablecoin itself being underpinned by something other than what it represents.
Okay, so you're saying just use something like Aave, and it's enough. It's like the Aave approach. It doesn't have to be more.
It doesn't have to be Aave. I mean, yeah, but it's just in general.
Approach.
I'm sure there's a lot of. I mean, I've very deliberately tried. We have a lot of members of our team that know way more about all these things than I do. I deliberately try to keep my head out of a lot of the crypto projects just to be able to stay sane and focused on the business side. But from what I see, my perspective is, I think stable. If you really want to connect this to the everyday user, which means actually cooperating with regulators, keep the stable coin. If it represents itself as being a euro or a dollar or a Uganda shilling, keep that part very clear and safe. Build the risk layer on top, because there's legitimate, just in the United States. You don't even have to go abroad. I mean, there are a lot of people that feel that it's not fair that you put $10,000 in Bank of America. They give you 0.4% if you're lucky and ask for it, and they loan 90% of that to your neighbor for 3 or 4%. And that risk that they're undertaking in fractional reserve lending is underwritten by U.S. taxpayers in the form of FDIC. Where's the justice in that, right? So it's not just about. I think that we have a message here in the U.S. It's not just about overseas. And so the point is, if you want to use DeFi to allow people in kind of peer-to-peer manner engage in leveraging their wealth for some return, as opposed to just surrendering that right to a bank, you got to really make that be very, very easy to understand and transparent. And so that's why my kind of suggestion would be keep the stable coins very clear and build that risk layer on top.
Great, thank you. We're almost at the hour here. I think we can go for another hour of learning for me. Rajat, do you have any final question before we wrap up?
Just a final question on, let's say, the next 12 to 18 months roadmap for Telcoin. What do you see your next milestones?
Yeah, I mean, we've had internally sort of the 3 pillars that we've looked at, where we wanted to get by the end of this quarter. And so, yeah, we're just about there and starting to think about the next phase. For us, that's been really getting to a product that people wanted to use, at least in the U.S., and something that could actually scale and earn revenue to support the other things. The others was, really kind of keeping without losing too much focus, keeping the balls rolling on the other layers of vertical integration, which is the Telex stuff and the Rivendell stuff and the bank layer, right? So those it's been a little bit frustrating to have to kind of distribute resources. So I think that for us, we want to get to the point from a financial standpoint that we can, in the next half of the year, really allocate appropriate resources to see those through to fruition, all the three different rails. But for us, it's by the end of the year, we'd like to be, where we really do have that full stack, not only making money in the U.S. and in Canada, but also have our kind of full stack deployed in a couple receiving places where we're not only as a company making money, but we've also kind of demonstrated the full cross-border use case. I also would like to see one of my favorite use cases is disaster relief and ways that you can allow people to directly send aid exactly to someone who needs it in a transparent manner and efficient manner. So I'm really excited to finally be to a point where we can, in the second half of this year, show that, put that an example of that into production, if it's in Haiti or Philippines or Africa. And then obviously the bank side. I mean, I think we want this to be, we've been frustrated to have to not talk about it. We're really looking forward to getting the kind of approvals needed to where in the second half of this year we can actually talk about it and push forward those aspects. So yeah, I mean, we want to set ourselves up for 2023 that is really about scaling in new markets and as opposed to building blocks.
Well, this was a lot for me to wrap my head around the vision, and I see there's so many people on the comments asking for more AMA sessions from you, Paul. Maybe after a couple of months, visit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have always thought I'm really horrible at these things, and so I'm glad that you roped me into this without really telling me what I was getting into. So yeah, I'm happy to more. And a lot of it has just been that, like I said, we've tried to be the anti of a lot of these projects that are extremely vocal about, not that we haven't, I mean, obviously we've tried to convey our mission because that's important to develop a community, but particularly this year and around the bank and some of these things, we're trying to take a little bit different path. But yeah, I think as things evolve more, we'll be able to do more of these for sure. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very obvious you guys have your head down and working through maybe what's coming as a winter. You have a lot of plans and, solid execution in there. That's great to see. There's a lot of questions that came in about the execution, specifics on Rivendell that we missed on, apparently, specifics on Tokenomics that we missed on, specifics on the bank that we missed on, but we're already through the hour, so maybe next time we're gonna have to take each one of these subjects on their own and make an episode of them. We'll see. Hopefully,
yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. So before we close this, maybe Paul, you can tell us. It's just to get some breather out of this deep session we just had. Tell me a little bit about your favorite hero, so I can go and read her or his biography, get some more learning out of this session, and we can call it a day.
Oh my God!
Take a while if you want to think about your favorite hero.
I don't know. Well, when I was when I was a kid, my parents and teachers told me about Thomas Edison, and of course I was I thought he was pretty cool. Then you grow up and you realize that people have flaws, and I guess you remember, what was it, more than 20 years ago, I flew to actually on a flight that was rescheduled originally when we met Vince more than 20 years ago in Lebanon. A flight from DC to Beirut, originally scheduled for September 12, 2001. I think that the sort of path after that for me was about learning so much about different people's perspectives, and understanding that even under people, the rhetoric of a lot of people that we don't agree with, there's some substance in a grievance or a perspective that is meaningful. And so trying to understand that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, as opposed to a hero, if you wanted to ask a hero quality, what I really respect is people that are able to listen to other perspectives and understand other perspectives and try to learn something from that. That's really what we've tried to internally as a company have as an ethos, is really trying to put yourself in other people's shoes and understand what's preventing them from living their life to the fullest, and really try to keep in touch with people around the world, and how we can help their situation.
Without much flattery, to be honest, I felt that indeed a lot of humility was coming out of this interview. So thank you, Paul. It seems you learned the quality you preach. I'll find a humble hero and read her or his biography. Thank you for now. Bye-bye. See you soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Bye-bye.